Record. Very big hello, everyone from Nicaragua. We have our final week of our artist residency here, and we're really excited to be joined by our resident and guest teacher and good friend, Holly Clark, as she tunes in from Mexico, one of our space providers, and I guess what would be the term you call it? Plant medicine facilitator of sorts.
I like plant medicine facilitator. I mean, the word shaman gets thrown around quite a lot, but I think really a shaman is just a space holder. So I think space holder or plant medicine facilitator suffices very nicely.
Excellent. Yeah, really excited to tap into a bit of your knowledge and background. We've just got off a podcast too that's gone live on discussing more on DMT and on Bufo. And we're looking at talking a little bit more on ayahuasca and your experience with ayahuasca and how to go about facilitating it and what the effects are and what it means to you in some of that depth, as well as any other questions people have that are joining us on live on the Zoom call, to tap into the chat box, as well as any other questions from our residents here. So, yeah. Why don't, if you can give us a little, a short background on how you came into your calling to working with plant medicine.
I was waiting just to make sure you'd finish the introduction. Thank you guys so much. And I wanted to say a big congratulations to everyone who has made it through the residency. You guys are coming up to your final week of 9 months, which is just so exciting. And what a huge thing to go through the virus and maintain the residency. And I also want to say a massive hello to anyone else who is jumping on, the rest of the Momentom family, and anyone else who comes on in the future. I'm so excited to be able to talk about this and to share a little bit of my understandings and my journey and my experiences with ayahuasca as well. I went and watched the link that you shared actually, John, with, what was it? With Dr. Gabor Mate.
Gabor Mate and David Suzuki, yeah.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful documentary, and it was such a joy to watch that because it really reminded me about one of the reasons I started this path in the first place. So talking about how I came into working or how I met ayahuasca probably goes back to the fact that I really wanted to help people when I was young, and there were two questions that I was always pondering, and I still ponder them often. It's how can I help people, but also how can I help myself? And I spent a lot of my younger years searching for answers to that. You know, was it through the medical system? Was it through helping people and their physical bodies? I became a personal trainer when I first left school, and after a period of time, I ended up in biomedical science, wanting to study to become a doctor. But a lot of questions were really left unanswered through all the mainstream medical channels of health. And not only were they leaving questions unanswered in terms of how can I help somebody else, but I also through that whole journey was reflecting on my own life and realizing that none of those channels, none of those systems were really helping me with my challenges that I was facing personally within my life, which was disconnection, which was my own health issues. I was having a lot of migraines at the time, which was relationship problems, which was so many different things that I know many people struggle with. That real seeking to end the holes that we feel like we have inside of ourselves. And the medical industry it just was not doing that for me. And even more deeply, like the more that I dove into having a look at the medical industry, the more it almost pushed me out of the medical industry. I remember a very powerful conversation that I had probably in the third year of studying biomedical science. There was a nurse who came in, who's a very, very good nurse. And he asked the whole cohort, if somebody came into a hospital with hypertension, why? And people were saying, hypertension, high blood pressure. And people were saying, I don't know, they have arteriosclerosis, or they have this disease, or they have that disease, and they have this disease. And at the end of it, he said, actually, all of you are wrong. The reason somebody has hypertension is because that is the exact blood pressure the body has decided it needs in order to maintain the body with where it is at that moment. So if you go in and you give somebody a hypertensive medication to try and bring their blood pressure down, the body will think that you have now gone in and disturbed the homeostasis of what that body needs in that state, and it will fight the medication. And so he said, we play in the gray zone as doctors and nurses to try and put the body back in a state of health that we believe it should be in, but never really it doesn't address the underlying issues of why was that person in a state of hypertension in the first place? Why is that person overeating in the first place? Why is that person psycho-emotionally upset in the first place? So it was a mixture of things. At the same time that I was questioning a lot about the medical system, I was also in a deeply unhappy space in my own life. I think I talked about this in the last podcast when I was talking about Bufo. I couldn't connect. I realized that I was having trouble connecting with people. I was having trouble in my relationships, and I was having trouble with my health. So I was 24 when I kind of had that was one of those moments where the rug gets pulled out from underneath you and everything changes in your life. And I ended up being way more interested in alternative therapies and off the beaten track ways to end our own suffering. And I realized over time, I think I thought I was special at that moment in my life, but over time I realized that many, many hundreds of thousands of millions of people come to those same realizations in their own journeys, that maybe this mainstream path is not the answer to our challenges. So off I went to India. I started looking at alternative therapies. I started looking at things like enlightenment and how do we liberate ourselves from suffering. I ended up with the Hare Krishnas. I ended up doing a lot of different meditations, looking at chanting Hare Krishna. I spent a lot of time chanting. That was the pathway that I found for about a year and a half. But even through that process, there was a lot of information that I learned. And I talked about this in a post I just wrote, actually. I don't think anything is wrong with information, but you come to a point where information can take you a certain distance, and then it becomes a hindrance after that. And a lot of the very deeply spiritual texts say there comes a point where you've actually got to go beyond the mind and have experiences. Got to have experiences, because I don't think it was Dr. Joe Dispenza who coined the term, but it was definitely him who said it most recently, and it was that knowledge without experience is just information, or just philosophy, whereas experience without knowledge is ignorance. So it was wanting to have both of those different elements of the human journey in my life. I wanted to have the knowledge, but then it was experience. And I got to a point where I was very frustrated, and I was really seeking a way to experience a lot of what the spiritual books were talking about. And I didn't know how that was going to turn up. And I think I mentioned this before in the last podcast, but all I had was to pray at that point in my life. And I've prayed a lot in my life. I've used the magic of prayer a lot, which isn't, talking about prayer, it's not, please God, can you give me? It's more like, dear God, thank you so much for guiding me. Thank you so much. It's a prayer of gratitude more than anything else. And plant medicines turned up really, really quickly after that, probably when I was about 28. I'm 32 now, so I've been working with the medicines coming up 3.5 years, maybe around this time, 3 years. I forget all the timelines, but I was 28 when I firstly was introduced to ayahuasca. And like many people, it turned up from left of center. I don't even remember why I started thinking about ayahuasca as strongly as I did, but it was in my field of consciousness, like an absolute niggling thought that I couldn't get away from. I started doing some research. I was in Australia at the time. I didn't know there were any shamans working in Australia, but the desire to get to Peru and to get into the jungle was so strong. I was studying Chinese medicine at the time, and I couldn't leave Australia. I didn't have the money, and I was deep in my degree, but it was so overwhelming that it was like, when you fall in love for the first time, you can't stop thinking about that person. It was like that. I could not stop thinking about it. It became an absolute obsession for a minute. And interestingly, a friend came over within the 2 weeks of me going through this process, and she said, I've just sat with ayahuasca, and I was so excited by this. So I thought she'd just come back from the Amazon, and she said, no, there's a shaman that's here who's from Brazil. So I rang the shaman, and within 2 weeks I was in my first journey with her, and she went on to become one of my best friends in the universe. She's one of my dearest soul sisters now, and she was the one who helped me begin my path working with ayahuasca. We're still in contact regularly. Mm-hmm. And that's really how I came to find ayahuasca in my life.
Amazing.
Before I keep going, I'll see if there's any questions or if you want to guide the conversation, because I've got so much that I can share about ayahuasca, and I don't know if you just want me to go with it or just stop and start and just answer any questions that you have, John.
Yeah, well, I think even just starting off, I know we've got some people that have never done ayahuasca before, and it's kind of the popular term. A lot of people are seeking it out. It's getting more and more popular than ever. How would you describe a journey on ayahuasca to someone that's never done ayahuasca?
Yeah, beautiful. I'm going to go back and just share a little bit of the history of it, and then I'll leave the history of it into the actual experience of journeying with ayahuasca, if that's okay. So just for those who haven't maybe heard of it or haven't sat with it before, ayahuasca is a medicine that has been used in the Amazon basin for many thousands of years. It's a drink, and it comes from 2 plants. So it's not 1, it's 2. It comes from the ayahuasca vine, which is sometimes called the vine of the souls. And it also comes from a leaf that is known as chacruna. It has a technical term, I can't pronounce it, I was going to try, but the chacruna leaf and the ayahuasca vine are the 2 elements that make this psychoactive drink. So inside of the vine, actually, let's go back to the leaf. The leaf in it has the known molecule DMT that many people have heard about now. So it's the one that is responsible for the experience of the psychedelia. Whereas the ayahuasca vine, which is a really important part of the whole process, has the MAOI in it. So our body and our gut has a monoamine oxide, I think it's a monoamine oxidase, which is an enzyme that breaks down the natural DMT. So normally, our bodies all actually produce DMT, and a lot of animals have DMT as well, but we break it down in our gut so that it doesn't move into our bloodstream. So we're not walking around in that state of psychedelic kind of journeys all the time. But when you mix the vine and the leaf together, the vine has an MAOI in it. It binds to the enzyme in the gut, and it stops the breakdown of the DMT, which is actually, if you care to know, it's really important when it comes to why we avoid certain foods. So we'll talk about that a bit later as well. But basically, that stops the breakdown of the DMT. The DMT then moves into the bloodstream. So a traditional ceremony is one in which this medicine has been prepared. It's really lovely to talk about the way that the vine is prepared, because a lot of the traditional shamans really put a lot of care into the preparation. They do believe that your intention during the preparation of the actual making of the ayahuasca is important. And so this is why there are many different brews, and there can potentially be different experiences. It could be due to the preparation of the drink by the person preparing it. I know a lot of the shamans I work with, and myself included, we are really, really careful about where we source our ayahuasca from, and we want to know the person who's brewing it, what their consciousness is like, how are they doing it, what their diet's like, are they singing to the medicine? A lot of the time, the shamans actually are singing, or the people who are preparing the medicine are singing to the medicine as they prepare it. So that plays a huge role in you'll have to enjoy the hostel vibe and everything that's happening here on
all good.
Lockdown. So in the traditional ceremony setting, the shaman will serve you your ayahuasca. You will drink the ayahuasca brew. It sometimes tastes quite lovely, and other times it is the worst thing you have ever tasted. I've had some incredibly acidic, almost like fizzy brews before, and that's an experience in itself. But other times it's really quite okay to drink. So again, many different flavors of it, but it's a thick black substance usually that kind of resembles molasses. Alrighty. So if we're going to talk a little bit about the journey of ayahuasca, it can begin at about the 10-minute mark. or it can begin at half an hour, or it can begin at an hour, or it can sometimes take 2 hours, and sometimes nothing. So all of these experiences are really normal, and they do happen for people. And interestingly, the dosage doesn't seem to matter. I've seen, based on like, if you're a big person, you don't need a bigger dose, for instance. If you're a tiny person, it doesn't mean you need a smaller dose. It seems to do with the person's consciousness, and it may just be that brew in that time. I've seen large, strong, burly men absolutely gone for 6 hours on half a cup. And I've seen some incredibly petite, tiny women drink 4 cups and feel nothing. So it doesn't seem to have anything to do with the amount that you're drinking, but to do with that person's ability to either surrender or whatever journey they're meant to be going on at the time. Just having a look. Can you throw up? Say that again. Can you throw it up in the first couple of minutes? Is that what you asked, Leah? It ran away. It came up and then it disappeared.
Oh, I was just saying that, yeah, you can throw it up within the first couple of minutes and it still has massive effects. Like you can just like literally, you think that it's completely out of you because you just puked it so fast, but then it's there. It's already touched you.
Yeah, yes. Sometimes people do throw it up in the 10 minutes. I've seen it many, many times where they've thrown it up in the first 10 minutes and they go on to have one of the deepest journeys of all the people in the ceremony. So it doesn't, if you do throw it up in the first 10 minutes, don't worry about it at all. And don't ask for another cup straight away because it could potentially be like going in at a double dose before you even realize. So still wait until the shaman, although the shaman probably, they won't offer it again in the first 10 minutes. They'll let you wait until it's there. Do you have a question, John? Just so you come off.
No, keep going, and then I want to get into the Dieta, like you were saying. I'm really excited.
Yeah, cool. Just so you come off the speaker, so I wondered. So just a little bit about the experience of it as it begins. The actual amount of DMT and the drink is quite a small percent. It's quite small. So the shamans believe that the spirit of ayahuasca actually enters your body and it starts to work through your body. And at this point, your senses can become way more expanded. We like to think that it's probably more of like a third eye kind of expanding experience. So you can hear more than you normally hear. You can see more than you normally see. You can smell more. You can feel more. And there is an infinite number of experiences that a human being can have on the journey of ayahuasca. They're all different for every person, and they're all different for yourself each time you journey with it. So it can go from anything from seeing the fractalized colors of the universe to feeling different things in your body to something that I really love about this is I do believe that this medicine works with your own consciousness. So it will come to you in the way that is most beneficial for you. And usually it will filter through your own belief system. So if you were brought up with a Christian background, it's very likely that you may visit Jesus or Jesus will come to you in your journey because that's your way of acknowledging the divine. If you're Buddhist, you might meet Buddha. If you don't believe in any kind of religious figurehead, you may meet some other divine being. If you believe in angels, it may come in angels. If you believe in the devil may turn up. And this is a really interesting conversation when it comes to the shaman. We'll talk about it. Some people talk about entities and different experiences you can have, but I still believe it's in the realm of your mind and what your belief systems are. And this medicine is working with you very intimately and in all the ways that are most beneficial to you. Let me quickly just go through the purging before we get into the Dieta, because the Dieta will pull back into the purging as well. The purging is a part of the ayahuasca journey. Not everybody purges, but there is usually a large purging element to it. There's a few things, just from watching that documentary, that are fascinating. And also, I mean, I said I could talk about ayahuasca for a long time, but it's just so interesting. And I think it is worth mentioning all of this while we have the time and the opportunity to do it. But the parts of the brain that they have found ayahuasca to work is in the prefrontal cortex, or the neocortex, the amygdala, and also the insula, which is amazing. So the prefrontal cortex is where all of your personality exists. It's where all of your perception, reason, and decision making comes from. This kind of neocortex part of your body. The amygdala is the area in which fear and emotions and emotional impulses, trauma and fear is stored in the amygdala. This is really interesting. And then you've got your insula, which is another part of the brain that is all about pain, love, emotions, cravings, addictions, and enjoyment of music, actually. So it seems that this medicine can allow you to access the parts of your brain where there's sometimes very deep-seated traumatic experience stored. And, you know, I talk about doing a lot of primal therapies and trauma work as well. And I think there's a similarity between this, where you can actually have these parts of your subconscious that are really hidden in the cellular memory of your body can be accessed. And you can go through quite a cathartic process on ayahuasca, where you are purging and looking at and dealing with very deep-seated traumatic events, usually that happened early on in life, or if you believe in it, past lives as well, which I feel have an absolute place in this, allowing things to surface and then allowing you to physically purge them through a cathartic experience, which allows you to move it through the body, which is all, you know, when we talk about trauma work outside of medicine work, it's all about processing emotion and trapped cellular memory through a cathartic process. So the purging with ayahuasca, you've got a couple of different purges. You've got, for instance, the vomiting purging. And the vomiting purging, whether this is 100% the truth or not, I'm not sure. It doesn't really matter. But the vomiting, some shamans say it's the emotional cleanse. So you are purging emotional baggage and emotional trauma. The voiding of your bowels is, or like going to the toilet and getting diarrhea, is physical, like letting go of the physical trauma in the body. Crying can be part of the mental cleansing process or the emotional cleansing. And then yawning. Yawning is something else that we see a lot happen. It doesn't necessarily mean the person's tired at all, but like some ceremonies, I've just been yawning and yawning and yawning and yawning and crying and yawning. And they said that it's a part of the mental cleansing process. So all of that could be seen as a trauma release. And at the same time, inside, the person may be actually accessing, you know, memories of things that happened in their childhood or in their past lives, or just things that they had to deal with. And then they're getting to purge and cleanse it at the same time. So, and as that's happening, the shaman is singing the Icaros. This is the last thing I want to say before we get into the Dieta, because that kind of covers the basics of the whole ceremony. Then you have the shaman who will share their Icaros. I've been in two types of ceremonies. I've been in ceremonies where there is electronic music, and I've also been in ceremonies where there's Icaros, which means the shaman is actually singing to you. Both are powerful, both are beautiful, and I think the shamans who have worked with electronic music have put a lot of intention into the music they've chosen, and so that also plays a role. Whereas a shaman who is singing an Icaros, they probably are more, I've seen it done in so many ways, but a shaman who is singing the Icaros is not so much about the song, but more about the vibration that they are sharing in that moment that can clear certain parts of the room. So they can see what's happening, and they can actually help to move the person through their healing process. And they know how to hold the space in the room with the Icaros. A lot of the shamans say that they actually put themselves aside, and that ayahuasca works through them and sings. So this is a part of that journey. And again, I've seen shamans work with electronic music and it be as moving and as beautiful and as perfect for the person. So that's the covering of the overall the journey there.
Well, while we're talking about Icaros, let's talk a bit more about that. I find that really interesting because it seems like they had an early on, I mean, this is thousands of years they've been singing Icaros with the ayahuasca journeys, as if they knew that the vibration of the voice and the frequency matches the frequency and energy, just like in some of the tapestry and behind you, some of the art that they have, having the energy lines everywhere. And it seems like they're really kind of already in tune to understanding some of the fundamentals of like subatomic particles, really, and how energy works through these vibrations. And yeah, so I feel like the Icaros is such an integral part of the whole journey. And yeah, a tool that they use to get into there. So I don't know if you have any other insight into the Icaros or into like what your experience has been like working with sound in psychedelic ceremony.
So beautiful. Firstly, this is a tapestry made by one of my teachers in Peru, Roberto, and he is now about in his mid-70s, and he did this recently. So such a beautiful depiction. And yeah, the Shipibo artwork is all based on the vibrations of the music, and there's certain Icaros sometimes I believe patterned into the ayahuasca tapestry and the art. I'm going to share a little bit about the Icaros from my actual personal experience, because the last journeys I've been on both in Peru and Bolivia were about learning to sing. That was part of my training. And what happens, or what seems to happen, was happening for me personally, was I entered a state in which I could see the vibration of, I could see vibration. It was tangible. It was a tangible experience of vibration, and I was able to see what different sounds were causing in that vibrational field. And I remember I had the shaman next to me, and she was singing, and at the same time I was singing, and I was accessing parts of the voice that I'd never ever accessed before, and I could feel the certain vibrations were not in alignment with my own song, which was really fascinating. So I was singing different words and different tones, and I was very quickly hearing ayahuasca saying that word, not that word, this word, that vibration, this way, not that way, this way. And I could feel, so I sat out there for a long time going through a process of learning Icaros. So I don't know the exact way everybody and every shaman learns their Icaros, but after speaking to my teacher, she said that the medicine was working with me in the language that I understood, to share with me the songs that would be most beneficial for me to sing as a facilitator. So traditionally, a lot of the shamans would go out into the jungle by themselves, and they would get taught their own songs through working directly with the medicine. And my teachers have all said it's not about perfect songs. It's not about perfect ways of doing things. It's a very creative process where that's the healer, the space holder. I won't use the word healer because nobody heals anybody, but the space holder can come into such a deep state of presence with that medicine that they can allow the frequency to move through them, but the shaman is still having to filter what's in alignment and what's not. And so there is this process of like tuning yourself as a tool throughout the whole ceremony and being very perceptive to your own state of being, what's coming through you and what's happening in the ceremonial space. And then each shaman is also quite different. Some shamans see things in imagery. Again, I think this has to do with the way they work. They can physically see a landscape, and other shamans feel it. So they go through and they use it through their feeling system. But everyone is different in the way that the universe is working through them. So it's a very creative process for each facilitator, and it's a process of coming to trust yourself very deeply in your own connection to your own center, right? So that's a little more of the understanding I have about the Icaros. In saying that, there's Icaros for everything, calling in your angels, calling in certain things, healing the body, helping somebody to move through sadness, helping somebody to find joy. There's all different frequencies and there's all different intentions behind the songs. So it is an art form, and it takes many, many years to keep learning those things. And I think many shamans, it's a lifetime art form.
Yeah, it's such an important part. Even in my experience, the Peruvian style, it would be the shaman and then the maestro, the person whose sole job was to sing. And that importance of, or even how people bring music to the ceremony. And some ceremonies are open to people to bring their own voice, sound. So love all of that. And well, speaking of the variation of Icaros and sound, let's go to the Dieta, because there's such a variation of information for what goes into a Dieta. You'll hear anything from 40 days before, no sugar, with that, which that would include fruit and all these types of things, no meat, no alcohol, obviously. And then some shamans are much more liberal and kind of saying, okay, well, a few days before, just like be lighter on this or that. And so I'd like to hear your opinion on the variety of dietas that are out there to go into ayahuasca.
So the Dieta is not just the diet that somebody's eating, but it's also the physical and mental Dieta as well. So there are a number of different ideas. Some of them are really important to follow, others a little bit more liberal, and some of them are just personal. So traditionally, the hardcore ayahuasca journeyers in the jungle had a very simple diet, but it was much easier for them because their local food was simple anyway. So the Dieta restrictions were not all that hard to follow because what they had access to was simple organic foods. Whereas as we keep introducing so many more foods that are full of chemicals and they're full of hormones and they're full of all sorts of unnatural substances, the list of the Dieta has had to expand and expand and expand for a Western audience. So let's have a little look. I'll give you the most common things, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about why it's important so that we understand. But in a very basic sense, the most common and kind of the widely accepted Dieta guidelines in terms of food are flavorless foods. So you take out flavors, you take out salt, sugar, spices, hot peppers, onions, garlic, and then you also on a physical level take out sex or any type of peak orgasm and alcohol and meat. So these are just the overall easiest things, and that a lot of shamans or practitioners all around the world agree on taking out of the diet if you can. But I want to go through some of these things because some of them are more important than the others, and I'll talk about timelines as well. So it is believed that by reducing things like flavors and salts and sugars, and a lot of the more, the Hare Krishnas, I know I did follow the Hare Krishnas for a while, and they were very big on food, and they take out a lot of these foods because they're foods that are based in the kind of consciousness of passion, and passion can be quite a distracting consciousness. So we're taking out foods in the realm of passion, because they can interfere with the energetic journey of ayahuasca. So we're removing anything that could interfere with the purity of your experience of just connecting with the medicine. So it's not so much about being dangerous, it's more about being able to connect more deeply with your own experience in that. This also includes caffeine, actually. And then if you want to get onto the physical level, media, music, a lot of like working with other people. So the cleaner you can, it's just about being clear and clean as much as you possibly can and not having a lot of external stimulation coming in. This is, the more you are committed to doing that, the deeper that your journey may be. And I'll talk a bit about my personal experiences with that as well. It basically says that taking out a lot of these substances will just help take out the interference with the plant's energy. This is the idea behind a lot of the dietas. I found this, I want to share some of this. This is such good information. Okay, this is my experience as well. It says if you are a reasonably healthy, mentally balanced individual who is not currently using pharmaceutical drugs, ignoring the dieta will not result in bodily harm. In fact, you actually may not notice anything. There are people who don't follow a dieta and go into ceremony, and it's okay. So the question is, why bother? And so is there a difference between being on a dieta and not? And my experience is absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. So if you develop a continued relationship with ayahuasca, you will start to notice that the lifestyle you lead and the food you eat can have a very discernible impact on your ceremonial experience. Notably, your ability to access different levels of consciousness and spiritual energies can be affected by the level of toxicity in your body, mind, and spirit. And that I can attest to 100%. I've done some very strict dietas where it took everything out. It was oats and quinoa and broccoli, and that was it. And lemongrass tea and water. That was it for days and days and days and days. And the clearing of the body the body became so empty in a way, so empty that the experience of being with the medicine was so pure. It was completely different. It was a completely different experience. So I think that the dieta plays a big role in your ability to access levels of consciousness that you can't access when the body is working so hard on digesting chemicals and toxins and heavy food. So I do think it is important. Some of the most sublime energies or vibrations that are available for the human being to experience, the more subtle energies, are easily experienced when you are physically and emotionally clean. So that even goes into a really good preparation, which you guys at Momentom do so well, is to be doing yoga, is to be doing meditation, is to be doing anything that keeps the mental part of yourself clean as well. So that's your physical. In somewhere like Peru, if you're going into a Dieta long term, like if you're in the jungle and you're be able to do like months, 2 months, 3 month long journeys with ayahuasca, they usually will put you through a purging first. And I've worked with different purgatives before medicines as well. So you've got your tobacco cleansings, you've got your Cambo purges, you've got some other plant medicine purges that if you're in the jungle working long term with ayahuasca, they can actually use it to purge the body of all of its toxins and emotional baggage before you then go into an ayahuasca journey. If you don't, it doesn't matter, but then what happens is ayahuasca usually is the one doing the purging for you. So it's then ayahuasca, your journey becomes about purging. So if you're heavy with toxins in food, then you may spend your whole ceremony purging a lot of the toxins and the heavy foods in your body. In saying that, that may be the perfect thing the person needs to readjust their diet. And that they might come out and say, I just had the most profound, most horrific experience where I got a very deep insight into what I've been eating. So there's a couple of, I want to go more deeply into what types of foods. That's the overview there, but I just will stop and see if you had any questions so far.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of great information right there. I've got a question about the purging, since we're talking about purging. And do you find there's much of a difference between the purging on combo compared with ayahuasca?
I haven't sat myself with Cambo a lot to be able to speak personally, but I've been in ceremonies supporting with Cambo a lot. And I would say that yes, there is quite a distinct difference, usually because when you're purging with ayahuasca, you're also in a journey with ayahuasca. So there's a lot of you're on a journey with the process of purging even. So you can be talking to the mother while you're purging. People have experiences of purging like snakes out of their mouth or letting go of all sorts of things. And people in ayahuasca have purged, just probably with Cambo as well, some really incredibly interesting amounts of diarrhea have happened where you don't even realize your body had that much in there. That can also happen on Cambo, but Cambo doesn't have the psychedelic experience usually. It's normally just a purging experience. However, this is where I'm having trouble answering because a lot of people have so many different experiences on ayahuasca. They have so many different kind of purgative experiences on Cambo, which can all be physical and emotional. So I would say there's a difference, but then there's also a difference between person to person from journey to journey as well. I don't think that Cambo gives you the insight into yourself that ayahuasca does. So when we run retreats, and then what we do is we do Cambo first as a cleansing, then we will go into ayahuasca the next day or a day after that. In other retreats, I've gone through tobacco cleansings first and then ayahuasca. So,
Great. Going back to the Dieta, yeah, just to reiterate, there's no danger in not adhering to as much of a diet. It's just less of an impact, less ability to digest and integrate the medicine of ayahuasca, correct?
Yeah, there's absolutely 0 deaths that have been noted based on bad diet interacting with ayahuasca. It's just uncomfortable. So one of the reasons, another one more of like on the physiological side of why we have a dieta with certain foods is the MAOI, which is the monoamine oxide inhibitor in the ayahuasca vine, is binding to your monoamine, or it's binding to the enzyme in your gut that breaks down tyrosine, which is an amino acid. And so any food that contains a high level of tyrosine, or it's kind of one of its breakdown components, which is, I think it's tyramine. So it just basically, the enzyme in the stomach that breaks down certain foods is offline for a while. What that means is if you're drinking ayahuasca and you take that enzyme offline and you have in your system foods that have a lot of those amino acids, you won't be breaking them down through that. And so you'll feel nauseous, you'll feel sick, you might feel like vomiting the whole time, but you can't. So it just makes for a really uncomfortable journey more than anything. It's not dangerous. It's not life-threatening in any way. It's just uncomfortable, and you can spend a lot of your vital energy, which could be used to actually be accessing higher states of consciousness, on trying to deal with the fact that you're as nauseous as all hell. A lot of the spicy food is taken out just for a practical reason, not so much because you're going to be in trouble with ayahuasca, but you're going to be in trouble with that coming out of your mouth, your nose, your eyes, and your butthole when you're on the toilet. So that's why you want to take out all spicy food, because it's just not comfortable. So again, no deaths on these things, and no danger at all. The reason some of the information on the web seems to be a bit more serious when it comes to the Dieta is because mixing certain foods with pharmaceutical drugs that have MAOIs in them is much more dangerous. So if you're taking a pharmaceutical drug with an MAOI as opposed to the vine with the MAOI, there are certain foods when mixed with certain drugs that have caused death, but not the short-acting, reversible, small amount that comes with the ayahuasca vine. So again, it's not a problem. It's just recommended for your own journey to be as clean and clear as you want. I'll talk about alcohol briefly there for anyone who just wants to know about alcohol as well. Again, not dangerous. There are Santa Daime, which is kind of the Brazilian way of drinking ayahuasca. It's another ayahuasca church, who drink and have ayahuasca at the same time, but they have very small amounts. However, what might happen on someone, if you drink a lot and then you have ayahuasca, you can become highly or acutely aware of the poisoning effects of alcohol in the body. It doesn't enhance it. You just have access to realizing that alcohol is a poison. So one experience I had was more with the bufo, because I don't drink, but I remember I had one glass of red wine. About 3 hours later, I went into a journey with bufo, and it was like feeling every cell in my body was being poisoned. And I just sat there. It wasn't a poisoning. It was just becoming aware of what was already happening in my body because of the alcohol. So after that, I never drink. I never. That was the last time I think I had a drink, because it was just acutely uncomfortable to realize what we do to our bodies. Again, not dangerous, but this kind of experience could happen where you're having a very uncomfortable insight into some of the behaviors that we do unconsciously that are really not good for our bodies, especially if we're wanting to evolve in our consciousness, if we're wanting to elevate ourselves. Now, some people just want to make a small shift in their life. If you're wanting to evolve yourself into a light worker, if you want to use this name, or a light being, then the lighter you are in your body, in your food, in your diet, in everything, is going to play an effect. And the more you keep journeying with ayahuasca, or on your spiritual journey, the more you go on your spiritual journey, the more aware you become of anything that is out of alignment with the highest frequencies that you could be at. So that's just part of it.
So what would be in your top list for the Dieta, for the must-haves, and then the other ones that are, kind of in between there? You had your 5 or 7 things to definitely cut out.
Yeah, I think it was the list that I gave to you before. So you want to take out salt, definitely. You want to take out sugars as much as you can. You want to take out caffeine as much as you can. I would take out anything spicy, and I would take out alcohol and meat. So they would be all the things. The other idea would say things like, that's your food. So the other idea with things like media and different musics and sex is that this is one belief, and I think if you don't have a good grasp on your own consciousness or your own mind, it can be very helpful. You're opening yourself up in an ayahuasca journey to feel things that you don't normally feel, and to allow things to be felt and move through you that you don't normally feel. And the idea in some of the shamanic traditions is if you're listening to media, you're having sex, you're taking on a lot of other people's stuff as well, And you may find that within your ceremonies, you've just got so much shit to deal with. You're just accessing so much more, and it may not be your stuff so much. It's all the stuff coming from the media and all. That's why they're saying that Dieta is really clearing yourself as much as you can, so that it's just you and you as much as possible. The other thing about sex is that you lose your energy. Just like with Bufo, a lot of these medicines are using the more energy, more of your vital energy you have to go into your journey, the more you can access higher states of consciousness. So it's just worth it. It's worth it. If you're serious and you want to make the most out of it.
What's your ideal timeline for adhering to a dieta like that?
So if you're on pharmaceutical drugs, medications, you want to be off them for about 4 to 6 weeks. When it comes to food, it's up to you, but if you can start ideally 2 weeks in advance, if you want to have an incredibly clean experience, you can start dieting 2 weeks in advance. I work with shamans who literally say 24 hours in advance to take all these things out. So on the Gold Coast in Australia, where it's much harder for people to follow these diet guidelines, my teacher just says 24 hours before, take things out. If you want a really powerful experience, start your dieta maybe 2 weeks in advance. You guys eat vegan anyway, so there's a lot of things that already aren't in the diet. But definitely in the next 2 days or before you go into ceremony, take out sugars, take out salts, take out flavors as much as you can. Go into simple foods. I've been at some centers that literally they still have eggs, they still have quite an interesting array of foods, and I've been at the other one, which was just quinoa and oats and broccoli. Both profound. I really enjoyed both of them, but I could feel the difference, definitely, when it was just the quinoa and the oats. 24 hours if you don't have, that's your minimum. Then on the day of your ceremony, you can eat, let's just say this. Juicing is also a fallacy. Juicing is not a great thing to do before your ceremony, because juicing, you really a high level of sugar in your juices. And a juice actually even has more sugar in it than just eating the fruit. So juicing, sometimes people think a juice is a cleanse. Not always, actually. And the juice is not always the great idea, because if you've been juicing, you might go into your journey, then you've got to process a lot of sugar. And the other thing is, you could end up being super freaking hungry about 4 hours in, and then all you can think about is how damn hungry you are. So actually, and then you're just like, this is beautiful, but your stomach is just dying of hunger because you spent so long cleaning your body up. So actually eating on the day of your journey is not a bad idea. Eating breakfast is good. Eating lunch is good. Just stay with your plain dietas. All of the centers I've worked at, you eat breakfast and lunch. And I think a 6-hour window. So you want to stop eating about 6 hours before you go into the ceremony.
Awesome. I've got one more question, then we'll open things up to anyone on our panel and some of our other residents here. But you're talking about how we take on other people's energy sometimes if we bring in, whether it's through sex beforehand or being really busy or a lot of media and these things. How is that translated into a ceremony? If you're in a ceremony with 8 people, 20 people, how much do you take on people's energy within that ceremonial space?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And the answer that's coming to me straight away is that the shaman knows what to do with that. So once you're in the ceremony with other people, the shaman should be able to see and recognize what's happening between the group energy. And this is, I think there's something to be said about clearing yourself as much as you can before you go into a ceremony, because you're taking yourself into that ceremony. However, everything can be seen as a healing process, and I think that the group of people who turn up in that ceremony in the state they're in, there's no accident for that. But just pay attention to yourself before you go in. I don't know why this is coming. I'm like, it's kind of like the coronavirus, you know, we want to take care of ourselves, because it's not just about what we're letting in, it's also about what we're giving out as well. And then you just do the best you can. But if somebody, I mean, look, I've had people in ceremonies with me who are addicts and who are deeply suffering, who've brought a lot of shit into the room, but there's something healing about that state of being for everybody else in the room as well. So just have a bit of faith and trust that you do the best you can, and the people you end up in that room with are exactly in the state that they're meant to be in with you. And this is where just trusting and feeling safe with the practitioner is really important. The shaman should be able to guide that process really nicely, and it's all okay.
Yeah.
I could go into so many ideas about this, because at the end of the day, there is nothing separate from you. So even that energy that's coming in from other people, it is also you. But it depends on your capacity and your level of awareness and understanding to know what to do with that in a ceremonial space. So if you're coming in and you're new to ayahuasca, you don't know what to do with that, it's harder. But over time, these things are no longer a problem anymore. It's not a worry. It's why a shaman could go into a ceremony with anybody in any state, and it shouldn't affect the shaman anymore, because they've cleared themselves of this. They have accepted it all. It's just all moving through them in and out of the room. So, I mean, there's a lot more to be said on that, but I hope that answers the question enough to
Yeah.
feel good.
Yeah, I just find that dynamic in the ceremony is really important, and you can't help but feel other people in the room and how vulnerable you are. But like you're saying, it's all part of the journey, the collective journey as well. I've even had feelings of when other people are purging for me, or I've had to try and help release some things for other people in the room. If you have any experience with that, how that works as a collective in ceremony.
Absolutely. So we're all helping each other when we're in the ceremonial space. And sometimes you will be purging and you will know that you're purging for the person next to you because they're really struggling with it. I've had this experience before. I've had many experiences where I'm going into my own journey, the person goes into theirs, and all of a sudden I'm in their journey with them, going through what they're going through because they're needing that support, and that's just what's happening. But the whole journey is one about awareness of yourself the whole time. Can you remain aware of yourself and your energy? And just like in your normal everyday life, are you able to take responsibility for yourself in that journey? And that's part of, I guess, the training of ayahuasca over a period of time. So there's a big difference between going in as a practitioner. So there's a big difference between being a patient of ayahuasca. Ayahuasca deals with you very differently as a patient, as opposed to being an apprentice or a shaman. That's a very different level of training that's happening there. And different for each person as you go. So this is why everyone in the circle the next day usually will go through a sharing, and the shaman will have different answers for each person based on where they're at and what they're going through. But everybody will be helping each other in the ceremonial space for sure. And you'll realize there's just so much. You can feel that what that person is going through over there is bringing up exactly the healing you needed to go through to face. Or maybe sitting there and this person is representing your child and you're going through a healing with that. Or this person is representing your grandfather. And a lot of times why we don't interact with people in ceremony too. We're asked not to interact because you don't know the process that person is going through, and we don't want to pull them out of that process, which is why the facilitator is the one who has control over that. It's beautifully and very fast. It's that scientific surgery on a multitude of levels inside an ayahuasca journey.
Gabby has a question here.
Hey, so can you hear me? I don't know, it was breaking up a little bit. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, no, I can hear you.
Nice to see you. So you said that you start feeling the medicine or ayahuasca like 10 minutes after you take it, and sometimes 1 hour and sometimes 2 hours, but like I've journeyed with it for a few times, and it just seems to me that like I start the journey like days before, like as if I'm like almost spiritually, like I know I'm going through it. So it's like, I just wanted to talk on that a little bit because it also helps me set intentions on what I'm going to like go further into, and what is that about? Does that happen? I don't know. Just wanted to touch base on that.
I think the second that you commit to making a choice to work with ayahuasca, so the second you commit to any type of journey, whether that's with ayahuasca or the second you put down money for it, the second you say, I'm definitely doing it, the second you energetically make a decision that you're going to be working with a medicine, it already starts working with you. So a lot of the time, people, months before they're going to be doing this work, shit can end for them. All sorts of things come up. Sometimes it's shit, sometimes it's other things. But for a lot of people, stuff that they haven't dealt with, a lot of things start going on in their life. A lot comes to the surface for them. I've seen this happen many times. It could be that the ego starts to work. This is just one. There's many different things that happen for people. Again, I can see 10 people who had all different experiences of when they decided they were going to journey. All of this stuff happens. Sometimes the person's mind just gets really scared, and all of the stuff that they're trying to hide from and not deal with is just pushing up against them, and that turns up in their material reality. All of a sudden they're getting sick, all of a sudden they're lost a job, all of a sudden this stuff starts to happen in their material reality, and they think, oh, it is related. It is related. Exactly the mechanisms of what is happening, I'm not sure. People would say it is ayahuasca working with you. I would say it's your consciousness working with you, yourself, because you know, some part of you knows you're about to pull something apart that has been hiding and trying not to be seen. This seems to happen a lot of the time. So when we're doing plant medicine ceremonies, the amount of people who 3 days before are like, oh, my flight's cancelled, or something's come up, or no, I can't do it anymore. It happens all the time. But then on the other side of things, you may be having profound experiences. You may be actually moving through things you didn't know you could move through. So many things can come up the second you make a decision to go through something life-changing. It could very well be like the same for ayahuasca as making the decision that you want to get pregnant. You know, I'm just making this comparison here, but the second you decide to make a life-changing decision in your life, usually things start to happen around you and shift and change because you're about to go through something deeply transformative.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you. I definitely, I guess that's just the way I interpret ayahuasca as being just a very intense already happening. And that's why it's like a journey that you never really get out of, because then you're noticing things after that, everyday material world after. So, but that's just my interpretation of it. It just feels like it's always accompanying me in some way. But
yeah,
the thing is too, though, I have also noticed that it's a very potent psychedelic or psychoactive, and I wanted to know what.
Come close just a little bit because I'm just breaking up a little bit from you.
When would you not recommend this for someone?
For ayahuasca?
Yeah.
So you've got your obvious recommendations. If somebody's on an SSRI or antidepressant, antipsychotic drug, so anyone who's on medications, that is when I would not recommend to go. That's a no-no. So that's just like your absolute no-nos when the people are on medications. There are people who work with addiction, with psychosis, with PTSD and ayahuasca, and it's shown to be very, very powerful and very helpful. So I don't know who I would recommend not to do it. I would recommend somebody not to do it if they don't feel like doing it. I would recommend somebody not to do it if the reason behind doing it is because everybody else is doing it. I would recommend somebody not to journey with ayahuasca if they didn't feel safe with the practitioner, or the practitioner was not embedding in them feelings of safety and humility. But in a way, I would have a conversation with each individual person, and I would want to feel where they were at. And it's very rare that I have seen a shaman or a facilitator who's a trained and confident practitioner turn somebody down. It's very rare that I've seen someone say you can't journey, only if they've been on the medications. So yeah, I would talk to you individually and say, what's your personal motivation for doing this? And if we could see through that conversation, it wasn't something that felt like it was a personal calling to them, then I would suggest that they didn't have to do it. That would be more how I would go about that.
Awesome. Thank you, Holly. There's a question here from Leah. What is the integration phase all about, and what is the process typically like?
Yeah. most of our medicines, I'm talking about this a little bit, put you in a state where you can go into a phase of neuroplasticity during and after the ceremony, which means that you have basically got into some of the neurons in the brain that have been stuck or firing the same patterns for a long period of time, and you've shifted them around. This is what happens when you do trauma work, medicine work, ayahuasca, bufo, iboga. It really pulls apart the neurons in your mind, and you have this window of time to relay neural foundations and to actually completely transform your life after this. So integration, the first 2 days after journeying with any medicine is probably the most important, the absolute most important time. There are shamans out there who say, don't speak about your experiences, and there are some that do speak about their experiences. My preference for that in terms of an integration is that you have a sharing circle in which you do share about your experiences, but outside of that sharing circle, you then just let yourself germinate on what's happened. So you don't go into big philosophical debates trying to figure out what happened afterwards. Remember, your mind has just been expanded, and it's now going to want to understand what happened to it, and usually it can go back to its old way of trying to figure things out very quickly. So share in your sharing circle, but don't do a lot of mental stimulation gymnastics about it. If you can, in the days following, stay in your physical body. Do anything that keeps you in your body. So yoga, meditation, ecstatic dance, anything that brings you joy. And then you also want to be as committed as you can to not letting your mind run wild with thoughts that don't bring you happiness. Because if anything you think about in repetition, you're literally rewiring your brain to think that thought more powerfully and more quickly, which will create your reality around that thought. So you want to, in those days, just meditation, decide. You could do this with your intention, right? You could decide what I'm staying in a state of forgiveness and not letting any thoughts of blame or doubt or fear get in there. And if they do, I just, goodbye, no problem. I'm in my days of integration here, staying in my body, and I am staying committed to rewiring my brain. This is very important because medicines are not the solution. Medicines will not heal you. They will not transform your life unless you decide to do the work. You must make that commitment to yourself. I see men in their journey, and a week later they're back doing their same thing. And that's because it's an insight. It will give you the tools. It will give you the opportunity to change your life. But if you don't take it, no, it's not going to do it for you. That's not what the medicine is for.
Excellent. I think might have broken up a little bit there. You still with us, Holly?
I can hear you. Just it's frozen, but I can hear you.
Okay. Well, that's about our time here. Thank you so much for your passion and your expertise with such a big topic, and looking forward to many more conversations about this. Thank you for all the work that you do, and for the last few months being in residency with us and holding space for everyone along the journey of just experience of life. So thank you again so much, Holly. We appreciate you.
You're so welcome. I hope you all have a really beautiful journey on Friday. And just remember that ultimately it's always about surrender. It's always about surrender. So if you resist it, it's going to be wild. If you try and figure it out, it's going to be wild. But the more that you can just breathe, and that the mantra, everything is okay. That's really the thing that we discover through the use of all of these different tools. I believe that the core realization of everything is that it's all okay. So that's my favorite mantra in any medicine journey. It's all okay. Everything passes. It's all okay. And may you have the most beautiful journey. And yeah, thank you so much. I'm so passionate. So thank you all so much.
We love you, Holly.
We love you, Holly.
I can't wait to see you when I do. Bye.
Blessings.